Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
I will call this meeting to order and begin with a roll call. Starting with Mr. Epps.
Zachary Epps present.
Jennifer Lemon present.
Charles Burdell Williams present.
Mia Blitzstein present. Leah Mulhern present.
Ross Whiting present.
Robin Murphy present.
Daniel Shultz present. The next item on the agenda is approval of minutes of August.
So moved.
Ms. Lemon and Mr. Burdell Williams, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Aye, the motion passes. And Mr. Swigart, the rest of the items.
Thank you, Dan. All right, tonight, our typical agenda includes going over our interim financial statements, balance sheet, and change in fund balance. Given that it is September 3rd and the month closed over the weekend, that isn't quite ready, but as soon as it's ready, I will post it to the Financial Affairs Committee agenda and board docs for the public, and I will forward it to all the board members as well. After that, we'll take a look at some strategic plan updates, where we're at in the planning phase and some of the newer projects that were just passed last month, the last legislative meeting. We'll take a quick glance over the budget process and the Act 1 timeline, and a few more items as part of the state budget update follow-up from last month. So while I don't have financial results through the end of August, I did want to highlight some collection trends over the past 5 fiscal years, just so the board can get a feel where some of our local taxes are headed and their impact on the district and on our ability to pay our bills in the future. So going back, looking at June 30th, 2024, as this year closes, we had another good collection year. In real estate taxes, we had almost a 1% tax increase that would typically translate to about $900,000 in real estate tax revenue for the district. We spoke about this in another meeting. We had 2 $300,000 payments as part of a tax incentive program that hit in this one year. That was mostly a timing issue. One should have hit in the prior fiscal year. I think it was just something that was missed last year. But that left for, as predicted, a $900,000 increase in real estate tax revenues to the district. Earned income taxes are trending almost in line with the way wages are trending throughout the state. When you look at the state average weekly wage, or yearly average weekly wage rate. Real estate transfer taxes, we had that large real estate tax boom in the end of COVID as we were coming out of COVID. Real estate taxes, I would call this a normalized annual revenue at about $1 million. Our delinquent real estate taxes were less last year than they've been in a long time. Again, I think that's a sign of a healthy township and a healthy tax base. I wouldn't cause alarm by that decrease. And perhaps one of the most significant increases in recent years is our investment income. So when I first came on board back in 2022, we restructured our cash. We increased the amount we were investing each month. We extended some maturities to try and take advantage of interest rates. And in addition to just interest rates increasing on their own, we saw significant increases in interest income. As of last month, we saw the first decrease in investment return. I think as some investments were scared of a Fed rate drop or Fed rate freeze, we were talking 0.1%, down to 5.38%. So not a significant amount, just some jitters. We'll see where that heads, and we'll continue to monitor the Fed rate. Any questions on historical tax collections? All right, moving on to the strategic plan update. As you know, as part of our long-range facility study, the projects identified were the additions at Glenside and Cedarbrook, the high school infrastructure upgrade to add HVAC to the high school, the athletic facility project, which is already in process, and the district administrative office, which was the final project after the others were completed. So next steps on Glenside and Cedarbrook, the plan is to run those 2 projects concurrently. so that they can both be completed at the same time as Elkins Park can be diverted at the same time without leaving any students behind at Elkins Park. Our next step is to approve the contract with the architects, KCBA. We have a contract approved through for the stadium project. So the board action would be to approve an addendum to that project to simply allow for the scope of this work to be substituted, which we will get when the board is, we're trying to get it on the board for next board meeting next week. So be on the lookout for that. We also have to issue an RFP for a civil engineer and a project manager for those projects. Currently, we're using Burgess Engineers, which was purchased by Van Cleef Engineering Firm for the stadium. But I think, not that they're doing a bad job, I just think to be financially studious, we should do an RFP and try and hold them accountable in price. Same for a project manager to assist in this project. These will be much larger projects than stadium projects, so we're going to need additional support to get this project done. The tentative timeline provided by KCBA was to start the drawing process now, to hopefully bid in the fall of 2025 at some point, to start construction in the spring of 2026, and hopefully open after the summer of 2027. Very tentative timeline, back of the napkin type timeline to give you a window going forward. At the high school, we've already met with Snyder Hoffman. Snyder Hoffman worked with us on the fire alarm project and worked with us on helping us resolve some other issues within the high school building itself. So they're familiar with the building. They were also the mechanical engineers, I believe, who did some other projects in the past. I don't know about the library, but I believe some other spaces within the high school. One of the most reputable mechanical engineering firms that work with school districts in the area. So they were out last Friday on the 30th. They were evaluating the entire building to finalize a plan to add HVAC to the high school, given the financial constraints and the amount of time that the high school plans to remain open. So they are going to finalize this plan. At that point, I think we should issue an RFP for a mechanical engineer again, just to hold that firm also true to price. And if we do happen to interview another mechanical engineering firm that we're really happy with, maybe possibly consider as well. And then whoever is chosen will help us to develop a timeline for completion around the high school as well. Any questions on those projects? Questions?
Thanks. I do have, so the HVAC project, is there a timeline to that?
Not at the moment. So we brought Snyder Hoffman out so that they can take a deeper look into the building. We have two different proposals on the table. One is significantly more expensive than the other. We're kind of looking for the best mix of both of the proposals, where it's not overly expensive for a building that isn't going to be open in the next 20 years potentially, and is going to truly address the needs of students.
Just a question about the architectural work. Is that going to include figuring out how to address the parking issue at both Glenside Elementary and Cedarbrook if we're adding more students and staff?
So the site plans around the building would definitely be part of that consider. I think the parking situation is going to be addressed in every building now, because we're talking about moving fifth grade back to Wincote and Myers, two landlocked sites. It's going to be a consideration. So yes.
The other board questions? Questions from the public? One comment that many of us are going to be exploring the Pennsylvania School Board Association conference in October. And this is this board's first major construction project. So I would just encourage us as board members to look for training, look for sessions related to appropriate governance and oversight for board members as we're going on this wonderful journey and much needed journey, and very thoughtfully done journey. So just that comment. Yes.
I'm sorry, I mean, this may have been else, I did miss it, Terra Mass Office Park, for the HVAC system, when is that supposed to start and going into the high school? Did we say the timeframe?
So there's no timeline for that yet, other than as soon as possible, working on developing the timeline.
Okay, thank you.
And actually, a follow-up question around timelines. In October, when the timelines are being presented around the athletics facilities, which was talked about in the facilities meeting, will that also include a more detailed timeline for these projects? Or are we seeing that further down the line when more of these plans are finalized? Just trying to know what to expect.
Ideally, by October, we'd have a better idea around the HVAC project. But I mean, there's a long design window for Glenside and Cedarbrook, so.
Thank you. All right.
No, any other questions?
See none.
All right, I will move on to a quick highlight of the budget process within the district, now that the kickoff has officially started, and how that corresponds with PDE's Act 1 timeline. So the first step in the timeline is actually September 1st. That is when the Department of Education and State releases its base Act 1 index, which, as predicted, we've been talking about as ad nauseum, is 4%. Interestingly, this year, Cheltenham School District exceeded its market value aid ratio of 0.4, which means there's a potential that our 4% can be adjusted upwards. So our Act 1 index may be slightly higher than 4%. We won't get that until September 30th. That officially kicks off the Cheltenham's budget process. So over the next 2 months, November, December, I push out historical budget information to directors and principals so that they can begin to make decisions about the budget in their buildings and schedule meetings with them. I begin analyzing all the other expenditures in the district and hopefully make a determination by December about whether we need to have board action to exceed our tax increase beyond our Act 1 index of 4%, or draft an opt-out resolution, which is due on January 4th, state, indicating that we will not exceed that 4% increase, which, spoiler alert, probably going to be an opt-out resolution again this year in December. So January 15th is when all of the preliminary budget information is due back to my office, so I can begin assembling a preliminary proposed final budget. In February, we present that preliminary budget to the board. We discuss all the pieces of it. Per our teacher's contract on April 15th, that is the final date on which they can, or the date in which they're supposed to indicate whether they will be retiring from the district for those who have enough years of service. So that kind of really kicks off in a hurry how our staffing conversations for the following year. And then by May, we're presenting a proposed final budget. We're adopting a proposed final budget, and we're making it available for public inspection for a June approval. Hopefully, there's not a lot of budget moving pieces this year at the state level. So hopefully, we can stay on our current track of just having regular legislative meetings on the second Tuesday of each month and approving the budget in that time frame.
Can we change the dates to 2020?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, Ms. Barbier.
I'm sorry, 2025.
These are all.
So
These are all.
dates that are-
Sorry,
Yes.
this Act 1 index hasn't officially been released yet. It doesn't come out till December.
Okay, so we have time.
So I had to go in and manually update all the dates. I just missed that.
We've entered a time loop.
Oh, no.
2020.
Thank you. Any, are you ready for questions?
Yes, absolutely.
Any questions?
Just a comment, I really appreciate this timeline,
Yes.
just personally for myself to see if all the stages of an element of the budgetary process is very helpful. So thank you.
The official one's like 5 pages. You're really gonna like it.
I really like this one.
And on that note, I will say that there have been, this was multiple business managers ago, but this was actually a kind of recurring slide just to keep us on the pulse of remembering what that timeline looks like. So we might consider including it kind of maybe not a talked through item every session, but as one of the slides. Yeah, exactly.
I think it was here last year, but I'll resurrect it. We won't spend a lot of time. on it.
Any other comments or questions? I did want to highlight that adjusted Act 1 index. We were in that adjusted bucket, I think just 3 or 4 years ago, only like once before the past couple of years. It's just somewhat ironic. I always find the concept of an adjusted Act 1 index ironic. It's when the wealth of the community is not, so ultimately it's sort of a reflection of the wealth of the community related to real estate rates, correct? So it's sort of, you're able to tax people more when they have less to provide. So that's a fun Pennsylvania thing. But don't worry, we're not looking at even the normal Act 1 index, but the idea of the adjusted Act 1 being higher than your normal Act 1 because of local capacity. So stay tuned, but also as you reflect and we're thinking about how public education should or shouldn't be funded, I think this is part of that problem. So, thank you.
Any other questions? Now we'll move on. So a new twist to that Act 1 index. Going back to what we talked about last month and an update from the state approved budget that was done in July, we got some more clarity on 2 items. One being the school mental health and security grant, and the other being the Ready to Learn block grant. So I budgeted $150,000 for school mental health and security grant, and ended up coming in at $178 when all said and done. They released the final amount. So it's about half of the prior year. It seems as if they cut off the mental health piece and we're driving security this year. Although they kept the mental health language in there, but the focus really seems to be on security in this year's grant. So that final amount was released. That's one update. The other update was last month, we talked about a $1.2 million increase to the Ready to Learn block grant. So we are receiving the $1.2 million this year, but per a meeting with some of the administration at the state, talking about the application for that grant and what it looks like, they're talking about that grant being something that needs to be deferred until 25-26 and requiring a board resolution as to how that money is going to be spent in this school year. So when I asked directly, are we deferring this revenue until 25-26? Are we recognizing it since you're giving it to us? Accounting principle requires us to defer it. They didn't give an answer. They talked to their accounting team. So I'm thinking that that'll be a next year revenue item. And by the time we do the opt-out resolution, we'll have to make a resolution regarding how that money is going to be used to either reduce debt, reduce taxpayer burden, or the other 5 requirements, which were somewhat similar.
Questions from the board? I have a clarifying question on that point. Is that revenue? I'm a little confused. The cash arrives this year, but it's on the books for next year.
It's unnecessarily confusing.
Okay, I understand it's not, and I know it's.
So I didn't budget for it because of the uncertainty.
Understood that.
So it was not included in the budget as revenue line. The money was awarded. The money was intended by state. This is a state legislature item, so any complaints need to be directed to whichever one was responsible for writing this. So the money is designed to reduce taxpayer burden going forward, but how that's achieved is by developing it into next year's plan for how it's either going to be used to draw down debt or because this budget was approved on July 9th, it couldn't be done in advance.
So my next question though is it still, I think we had an answer last month, which was in the affirmative, but I don't know if anything's changed. Is it still something we should consider as recurring revenue and we could be using it on recurring expenses?
The bucket of money assigned to fund it is an 8-year window.
Okay.
But we've also been told that every year the budget can change. The money can be reallocated in different ways.
That does not sound like a great way to decrease taxes.
No. But it's important that that's why we're getting the money this year. It's allocated in the budget. to go to the district. It's coming out of this year's budget, so we're getting it.
Thank you.
Also, just one more clarifying thing here. The money is received. Are we not spending it? It's just here.
It just sits in our bank account and it sits on the balance sheet as a liability, in my opinion, until we get more guidance. So we demonstrate to the state how we're going to use it to whatever its intended purpose, and we fulfill that obligation and it becomes our.
Got it.
Similarly, how, you give somebody $100 for pens and that's not revenue until they've given you the pens.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe it's earning interest now.
I was hoping.
Yes, it will be.
So continue the same, so at some point later this fiscal year, it will be determined from administration how we would like to spend this money, and then we will have to have a resolution
That's correct.
that we approve,
And
and then that goes to the state.
that's something we did not get guidance yet.
Yes, right, okay, that's right, I'm just
I foresee this
big
looking,
picture.
this
Right,
looking
okay.
like a budget that is balanced using this money rather than.
And then, sorry, just to continue that one, just to close, then it will be used for next year based on approval of the resolution.
I look forward to discussing this more in future committee. Mr. Adams, yes.
Yeah, you mentioned last time about an application. So does the resolution
It's part of the
take,
application.
it's part of the application. So then really when we pass the resolution, it still has to go through some approval process before we actually use the funds.
That's correct. It doesn't seem like it's very robust.
Yeah, I mean, there's a
You
check.
gotta
box.
come for your report.
Any other board question or comments? Any question or comment from the community? Yes.
Scott Retail Park. Given that the mental health and security grant was reduced by, was that 45%? Do we have any idea what that's going to, how that's going to affect actual student population?
So in the short term, we have another grant that's kind of filling that void. That was the Montgomery County mental health grant that was issued last year. So the question is, how do we address that the following year, 25, 26?
Is that enough to fill in the gap?
For this year, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right. That was the final agenda item, correct?
That is the final agenda.
All right. Then if there are no other questions. Is there a motion to adjourn? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you all.